Welcome to the gut health video. The gut is an extremely complex organ and there's loads we don't know about it, but there's still quite a bit we do know. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how what we eat can affect our gut health and in turn how our gut health affects how we feel. So what does the gut actually do? The gut has the obvious function of digesting food, which involves extracting nutrients and getting rid of any waste, which means that poor gut health can cause all sorts of digestive symptoms like diarrhea, constipation, bloating and pain, as well as in some cases malabsorption of nutrients. But the gut also has some less obvious functions. It has a central role in developing the immune system and helping it to run smoothly. If your gut is in less than tip-top shape, it can lead to repeated infections, low energy, inflammation and even allergies, especially in children when the immune system is developing. The gut also communicates directly with the brain. And this communication pathway is called the gut-brain axis. It's a two-way communication pathway. The gut has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system, so it isn't actually run directly by the brain. But this communication pathway means that if we feel mentally stressed, the gut knows this and conditions in the gut can be affected. This can have a knock-on effect to the immune system, digestion, the production of neurotransmitters, and more. Conditions in the gut have an impact on what the brain does and how we feel. The gut actually has access to the emotional and cognitive centres in the brain. We can't talk about the gut without talking about the microbiome. The microbiome is an essential part of the gut without actually being part of it. The microbiome is the name given to the bacteria that live in the gut. It's now clear from research the bacteria in our gut is essential for all sorts of functions, like digesting some foods such as fibre that our own digestive systems are unable to. These bacteria also train the immune system, helping to figure out what is and isn't dangerous, and in this way can help to prevent allergies. Another thing the gut flora are responsible for is making neurotransmitters that work on the enteric nervous system, keeping the gut functioning. These neurotransmitters, like serotonin, are in charge of regulating the movement of food through the gut and also the sensations in the gut. With this in mind, it's easy to see how an imbalance of these bacteria can cause digestive symptoms like cramp and constipation or diarrhea. The gut is a fairly sensitive organ, and so there's quite a few things that can affect its health. Just like every organ in our body, the gut needs nutrients to function, so eating the right balance of nutrients is important. But it's not just our own cells we need to think about. We also need to feed the bacteria that live in our gut so they can perform all their really important functions. Stress can affect hormone production, which in turn can alter the way our gut works. The environment around us and the things we come into contact with will also affect the gut. And there are some crossovers here that further impact our gut health. We're going to look in a little bit more detail about why these things affect how our gut functions. First, the environment. Different strains of bacteria live in different places, and in order to get a good range of bacteria populating your gut, you need to come into contact with a lot of different environments. So there's a big difference between the bacteria that live in cities compared to those that live in farms with livestock, for instance, especially in the diversity of those bacteria. So a farm that has cows, sheep and pigs will have a far wider range than a building in a city. The evidence shows that even having a pet in your house gives you a good biodiversity in the gut. Dogs especially, probably because they get into everything when they're out on their walks. Physical activity can even affect the types of bacteria that thrive in your intestine, especially if you can combine it with getting out into a different environment, running in a woods versus running on a treadmill, for example. As I said before, bacteria need to eat just like us, and the ones in our gut eat what we feed them. Now, the most useful bacteria for us tend to like fibre, and we get that from eating plants. A food that we eat that feeds bacteria is called a prebiotic, and prebiotics are high in fruits, vegetables, whole grains and pulses. A recent study showed that people who ate 30 different plant foods a week had a greater diversity in their microbiome than those that only ate 10 different plant foods a week. There are some bacteria that like to eat fat, but they tend to be much less helpful to us in terms of our gut health. Bacteria are able to swap genes with each other. So rather than needing to wait millennia to evolve, they can just pick some DNA up from a neighbour. With this in mind, introducing bacteria to our gut can be beneficial. Fermented food that contains useful bacteria like lactobacillus can benefit the bacteria that's already living in your gut. When you consume bacteria in this way, it's called a probiotic. It's also possible to take probiotics in the form of a powder, pill or liquid. Antibacterials. Antibiotics are obviously fantastic, and we wouldn't be where we are today as a species without them. But they can be a bit of a disaster for our microbiome. Antibiotics kill the harmful bacteria that are causing us an infection, but they'll also kill all the useful bacteria living in our gut as well. This means that during and following a course of antibiotics, extra attention should be taken to recolonise the gut. Probiotics can work really well here. Now, as we already know, the bacteria in our environment determines our gut microflora. So if everywhere is sprayed with disinfectant that kills 99.9% of bacteria, that can have a profound effect on the bacteria we come into contact with. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be clean, but we don't necessarily need to kill all the bacteria all of the time. Stress. Now this is where it gets really interesting. As we saw earlier, thanks to the gut-brain axis, the gut knows when we're under stress, and stress can directly affect the conditions in the gut. Different bacteria thrive in different environments, and usually the most beneficial bacteria for us prefer conditions of a relaxed person who gets plenty of sleep and a varied diet. If these conditions are disrupted, it makes it difficult for them to survive. A lack of sleep has been seen to alter the microbiome within days. Now, anxiety itself produces a hormone called cortisol, which is also known as the stress hormone. This stress hormone suppresses the parasympathetic nervous system, which in turn can alter the conditions in the gut, which can directly affect digestion. Now, digestion issues themselves can affect conditions in the gut too. So if you're stressed and that causes you some digestive symptoms and a lack of sleep, this can have a huge effect. Let's look at this in a bit more detail. Here you can see the process in action. There are two main entry points to this cycle: stress and a disrupted microbiome. Let's say we start with stress. Something stressful happens and our bodies produce cortisol, which suppresses the parasympathetic nervous system. This diverts energy to the fight or flight response and reduces digestion. This means that food stays in the intestines rather than being digested, and this can lead to inflammation. Now, at this point, the inflammation triggers further release of cortisol and the effect is enhanced. Now, the inflammation also changes the conditions in the gut, which disrupts the microbiome. This means that less of the neurotransmitters needed to make the gut function are made, which means altered communication with the brain along the gut-brain axis, potentially causing further stress. Now, this also causes digestive symptoms, which is stressful for the person suffering, and the cycle continues. Now, the big question: what can we do about it? Go outside, walk in the woods and get into the garden or the park. Try and get into as many different environments as possible and get some exercise. Eat a varied diet with plenty of fruits, vegetables and whole grains. While antibiotics are essential in some cases, taking them for things like a cold, which is actually a virus, not a bacteria, is not going to make you better and could negatively affect your immune system as your microbiome is going to be disrupted. If you do need to take antibiotics, take a good quality probiotic during and for a couple of weeks afterwards. You can also think about whether it's necessary to disinfect absolutely everywhere. Try to take steps to reduce your stress by using meditation and other stress management techniques. Give yourself plenty of time to relax and do nothing. And make sure you get enough sleep. Aim for 8 hours in bed every night. Now, this advice of exercising, eating well, and trying to live a stress-free life with plenty of sleep may sound familiar. Our microbiome is a key reason why the healthy living advice is what it is. Now take some time to think about how you could make changes in your life to improve your gut health.